closed between Tallman and Western after a major shooting during the overnight hours. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
More of Chicago's Morning Answer show comes your way next. Now your official Chicagoland weather forecast. It's going to be cloudy in the morning, giving way to some sunshine. Temperature hitting 51 degrees. Cloudy overnight will go down to 44. Then tomorrow, more clouds. It'll be breezy in the afternoon with some occasional rain. High temperature, 64 degrees. Currently, it's 36 degrees. Your next news update in 30 minutes. Continuous coverage of the latest news, traffic, and weather at 560theanswer.com. I'm Elisa Z. Now more of Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. You can win $12,000 towards the purchase of a new car or to cover your existing car payments just by doing acts of kindness. Learn more at 560theanswer.com/kindness.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and so it begins. New York Times reporting that Rutgers University is saying students must be vaccinated in order to return to campus. Mm-hmm. What begins at Rutgers spreads through the Big Ten faster than COVID.
Still having a hard time believing that they're in the Big Ten, but yes, they are part of it.
Spreads through the academy, spreads down to K through 12, spreads to your ability to move around the country, your ability to go to work. This is just beginning now, the vaccination requirement to resume life.
And Governor Pritzker said, the vaccination passport. Now, what you have to listen to this, what he's doing. He's saying, well, we're not going to force it. You can have an app on your phone. That's good. But places that you go, they may require it. It's private businesses. So now a restaurant might become a private business and demand that you have a vaccination before you get into the restaurant.
A restaurant is a private business.
Right. But he's anywhere you go. So if you want to go to a concert and you don't have a vaccination, well, that venue might not let you in.
Well, that's a private business decision, right?
Right, yeah.
The question.
So does it look like he's making us have a vaccination passport? But if you want to move around freely in the country, you're going to have one.
Well, we don't know that yet.
Well,
but to the question about some sort of app that allows you to show people that you've been vaccinated, there's nothing wrong with that if it's your choice. Mm-hmm. As long as it's your choice, right? And if people ask you to show that for a particular venue, a private venue, they have the ability and right to do that. You don't have to show that to them. You don't have to go to that venue or be engaged in that activity.
So what's your point? The point is it has nothing to do with Pritzker. Until and unless, stop overstating the case. There's no need to overstate the cases. It's a private business decision. Until and unless politicians move legislation to impose public mandates on private businesses, then there's not much to talk about. Because I respect private property rights. I don't know about you. Isn't the problem in this country we don't have enough people who respect private property rights? I don't have to agree with what somebody does on their property, but I'm not going to treat a private property owner the same way I treat an elected official making policy. For more on all of this, we're pleased to be joined by Martin Kulldorf, who is a professor at Harvard University Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital. Professor Kulldorf, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
So Professor Macri over at Johns Hopkins has had a couple op-eds in the Wall Street Journal over the last few weeks, most recently suggesting that what he suggested in his previous op-ed seems to be tracking, which is herd immunity in the country by the end of April. So if we're going to be at herd immunity in the early spring, whenever that may come to pass, then is it judicious for private or public institutions to be running around mandating the vaccinations in order to access their spaces?
Vaccine passports are a very bad idea for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons is public health, because public health is based on trust between the public and the public health officials. And if you try to coerce people into getting a vaccine, there's going to be more vaccine hesitancy and a reluctance to get the vaccine. And not just the COVID vaccine, but other important vaccines like the childhood vaccines for measles or polio. So it's counter-effective to try to do vaccine passports because it will make people more hesitant to get vaccines. And for older people, it is very important to have a vaccine for COVID because that's very high risk. At the same time, there's absolutely no public health sense for somebody who have had COVID to need a vaccine because they are immune from having had a natural infection. So
Yeah, but how long does that immunity last, or do we still not know?
well, we know it lasts for at least a year, so we know it's good protection. It might not last for a lifetime, and it's unlikely, I think, to last for a lifetime because that's the case for other coronaviruses. But even if it doesn't last forever, the second time you get it, you would typically get it more mildly. Of course, for vaccines, we have even less information. There, we only know that it lasts for at least a few months.
Right, and we know from more than 30 million cases, confirmed cases, that the reinfection rate is nil, don't we?
It's very, very low, and when there is the reinfection, it's usually mild infection. So 1 is very low, and 2 it gets very mild.
And with respect to the vaccinations and these requirements, they're starting to do research to to essentially see if, I'll take them in a neutral fashion, see if the vaccine is safe for populations that are open question at this point, pregnant women as well as newborns. And actually, Brigham and Women's Hospital, along with Massachusetts General, participated in a study of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, and the report out yesterday was that these vaccines are effective in pregnant and lactating women who can pass protective antibodies to newborns, according to this research published in the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. I know, anecdotally, and there's been some coverage of this too, that women who are pregnant or want to get pregnant are a little reticent because of the lack of research about the impact of the vaccine on the ability to bear children. Does this research that was out yesterday address that question fully, in your estimate?
No study ever addresses every question fully. But to date, we don't have evidence that there is a problem with the vaccine for pregnant women. At the same time, most pregnant women are young, in their 20s and 30s, so they are not at high risk for severe COVID. They can get infected like anybody else, but they're not at high risk for COVID, neither for themselves or their child. So they are not a high priority group to get vaccinated.
But here's the line that's coming from essentially the lockdowners, is that the Western civilization now rises or falls with the vaccine hesitant. Doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your health status, in terms of pre-existing conditions or no pre-existing conditions. If I don't go get vaccinated, or if somebody half my age in their 20s doesn't go get vaccinated, then we're doing a disservice to public health, and we're impeding a return to pre-COVID normalcy.
No, that's too dramatic, far too dramatic to put it that way.
Yeah, but I mean, in Illinois, if Dan and Mike Scott, if those guys don't get vaccinated, my kids can't go back to school Monday through Friday, regular school like it used to be, according to our governor.
So why is that statement too dramatic? The one you just heard, as well as mine.
Well, first of all, there's absolutely no public health reasons to keep schools closed. It hasn't been any time during this pandemic. Children can get infected, but their risk from COVID-19 is much less than from the annual flu, and we don't close the school for annual flu. Also, children do not infect others in a very high amount. So when school teachers get infected, for example, it's typically from another adult. It's not from their kids. So the school closures, I think, is the single biggest mistake during this pandemic. It has devastating consequences on children, especially working class children whose parents can't afford to put them in private schools who have been open or in pod schools or tutoring. So there's absolutely no reason why all children shouldn't be able to go back to 5-day in-person schools on Monday. If we take Sweden, for example, which was criticizing for its lax approach, wrongly so, I think, Sweden kept schools open during the spring, during the height of the pandemic. So all 1.8 million children ages 1 to 15 were in daycare or school, and exactly 0 of them died from COVID. There were only a few hospitalizations. And school teachers were actually at less risk than the average of other professions. So unlike flu, unlike influenza, schools are not a place where COVID transmits and drives the epidemic. So there's absolutely no reason to keep any schools closed during the pandemic. And the same is true for universities. And actually, closing university has the opposite effect. Because if you close universities, then the students go and live with their parents who might be in their 50s or 60s. So they are sort of medium risk instead of being at campus where they interact with other students their own age who are very low risk. So closing universities has actually the opposite effect on disease transmissions and was a stupid mistake being done. So the thing to do is if teachers are 60 or above, then you should let them teach from home online. But school should be open with all the teachers less than 60.
Provide some context for us with respect to the coverage of COVID variants. There's another story out yesterday. Grave concerns over new ultra-infectious, quote-unquote, COVID variant found in Papua New Guinea. The argument is being made, and it was made in Bloomberg just earlier this week, that we're never going to go back to a pre-COVID normal because we're never going to achieve herd immunity because of these variants, and we're just going to have to sort of learn to live under these COVID protocols.
Well, probably the person misunderstands what herd immunity means. COVID will always be endemic. It will never go away, just like the previous 4 coronaviruses. But we will get into an endemic state where it's not a big problem and will be less problem than, for example, the annual influenza seasons. As all viruses, there are mutations, so that obvious that has been from the very beginning. The fact that some variants come up which might be has a slight advantage in transmission is not a surprise, but that doesn't change the optimal strategy, which is to protect those that are a high risk vulnerable with vaccines and other things, while letting most people live normal lives. So if you've had the disease, you still have immunity towards new variants. And depending on the variant, it might not be complete, but you have protection against severe disease, even if you get a mild cold. So the idea that these variants are some kind of a scary monster coming to take. So that is a political question, and I'm just a simple scientist. So as a journalist, you probably understand that better than me, because to me it's stunning.
Yeah, it's also stunning to you what's been happening to some of your colleagues, some of the people who were like the most respected epidemiologists in the world until they decided to take a contrary position to the politicians and journalists and some others. Tony Fauci, of course, Saint Tony Fauci. You wrote about this in the Federalist. It's important. I mean, you're one of the co-authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, along with other respected men and women of science who you write about here from Stanford and Oxford and elsewhere. And this is a concern not just for the careers of these outstanding intellects and academics, but you raise the issue. It's a concern for the pursuit of science more generally.
Yeah, I think that's true. And if you read the media, you get the impression that they cite the experts who are in favor of lockdowns. But when I talk to those infectious disease epidemiologists that I know personally, that I talk to personally, the majority, not 100%, but the majority are against lockdowns and in favor of focused protection. But the majority do not dare to speak out because of the attacks that has been thrown at those of us who do speak out. And for example, in my view, the most preeminent infectious disease technologist in the world is Professor Sunita Gupta at Oxford University, and she has been completely trashed in the UK media for speaking what I think is just common sense when it comes to infectious disease technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I assume you've been disinvited from a lot of Cambridge cocktail hours on Zoom over the last several months as well, with the statements that you've made on the topic.
Well, as a single father, I haven't had time to do those cocktail hours even before the pandemic. So
Good for you.
You're not missing
problem.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, very good. Martin Kulldorf, he's a professor at Harvard University Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital as well. Again, co-author of the Great Barrington Declaration and one of the infectious disease experts who has spoken out from the beginning, like you just heard him here, with common sense and science and context, and has been very helpful in elucidating these issues for the public. Professor Kulldorf, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, both of you. It was a great pleasure.
Yes, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. United Airlines adds more flights as bookings increase. The race is on to reopen the Suez Canal, and Arizona now wide open for business. Those stories next.
From executive producer and MyPillow founder Mike Lindell comes a hilarious new faith-based comedy, Church People, with a special guest appearance from Mike himself. Church People is a hilarious, heartwarming reminder that the gospel is enough. It all starts when America's youth pastor, Guy Sides, realizes he's stuck in the megachurch marketing machine and wants to find his passion again. But when Guy attempts to get back to the heart of ministry, he is thrust into the throes of dissuading his misguided church leadership from performing a strange and potentially blasphemous stunt for the upcoming Easter service while navigating his own personal problems. Church People will leave you laughing out loud while ultimately reminding you of the true meaning of the gospel. Watch Church People at salemnow.com. That's salemnow.com. Use promo code MOVIE for additional savings.
As airlines begin to see passenger bookings on the rise, Chicago-based United Airlines is expanding its routes, adding 26 new routes from cities